I'm 29 now, and this story happened 10 years ago. At the time, I was jobless, but I found one as a security guard in an office building. The office building was located in a forested area, away from any busy streets, like completely secluded. The person who had the job before me had a car accident and apparently was paralyzed from the waist down. Nobody was interested in the job since you worked during the night and the office building was enormous. Plus, it was boring as hell. But hey, a job's a job. Once I started, a supervisor worked me in for a week. This was my first night working by myself. I came to work and took the night shift over from my colleague at 9 p.m. He told me that there were still some people left in the building before I went up to the 15th floor. I closed the main entrance in a way where you can only exit when you're inside, so no outsiders could come in. After I did this, I went up to the 15th floor where these people still worked to ask them if they needed to go anywhere else in the building. If not, I could make my round and close off all of the other floors, which I did. So I made my rounds and found nothing peculiar. I just went back to my front desk, and this was around 11:30 p.m. And now, the last people who were working on the 15th floor were just leaving. And the last one to leave, which was a man, wished me a good night. Once the last person left, I went up to the 15th floor and checked all the offices and locked it down. I went down to my front desk again. Since there were no people left, I put on all the alarms, which worked on motion detection and also when someone opened a fire exit. This worked on every floor, except the ground floor where my desk was. Within 5 minutes of putting the alarm on, the alarm went off on the 10th floor, and there was nobody in the building. The rule is, if an alarm goes off, you call the security company before you take action. I told them I would investigate the alarm and I would call back once I checked it out. Otherwise, if I don't call back, they would send a police car to check it out, just as a precaution. I checked the whole 10th floor, but I found nothing. I went back to the front desk to call the security company, telling them that it was just a false alarm. I kid you not, the alarm on the 10th floor went off like 7 times in 1 hour, and every time I checked the floor, I couldn't find anything out of order or even that there was anyone ever there. Since this was my first day working alone, and the alarm went off so many times, the security company thought I was screwing things up and wanted to file a complaint to my boss. Which would mean I would lose my job, which I had just gotten. In retrospect, the following was the dumbest thing I could ever do. Because the alarm went off again, since I didn't want to call the security company again and cry wolf, I went up to the 10th floor without informing the security company. The only thing I had on me was a mag light, since security guards in the Netherlands are not allowed to carry guns. I went up to the 10th floor, checked it out, and, as before, found nothing. The only difference now was, I pretended to leave, turned off the lights, and stayed on the 10th floor, listening if someone was there. 5 minutes went by, and I heard someone or something move. I was relieved and anxious at the same time. Relieved I wasn't wrong, and that there was something on the floor, but anxious because what was on that floor? I turned on the lights immediately and tried to sound as manly as possible, saying something in the line of, "I know there's someone there, show yourself!" And as you can imagine, there was no response. I'm so stupid that I didn't call for help, but stupid me went looking for whatever it was I heard on the 10th floor. I walked to the office where I heard the sound, slowly, and turned on the lights, and what I found was a little girl who couldn't have been older than 13 with long, brown hair, and was in white pajamas, squatting and rocking front to back on a desk, looking straight at me. The scary thing was that there was no emotion in her face or in her eyes. Almost shitting myself, I collected my nerves and took the girl by the hand. Like, what can a small girl do to a 6'8" tall guy anyways? I took her down to the front desk, offered her Coke, but she didn't respond whatsoever. The only thing I could do was call my supervisor and told him about what I had encountered. My supervisor's response was, "Stay right there, I'll be right over." I don't know why, but I had this gut feeling that there was something really wrong with this girl. Before my supervisor turned up, he called me and told me to call an asylum which was pretty close to the office building I worked at, just to check if someone was missing, and then told me, why else would there be a 13-year-old girl in an office building with no houses nearby whatsoever? And I called the asylum, asking them if there was anyone missing, and I got the scariest response you can get. They told me yes, as a matter of fact, someone is missing. I gave them a description of the girl sitting next to me, and it was in fact the girl who was missing from the asylum. They told me she was really dangerous, and that I should watch my back at all cost. They immediately sent people over to take the little girl with them. And a week later, my supervisor told me the story of the girl I had found. Turns out the girl killed her mom and dad and little brother whilst they were asleep when she was just 11 years old. Even in the asylum, she wounded staff members either by stabbing them with a pencil, or in another case, biting a piece of their ear off. To this day, I still have absolutely no idea of how she got into the building. We checked all the cameras, and there was no footage of her ever entering the building. To start off, let me just say that I live in a pretty gated community. Small town, small high school, good people, everyone knows everyone. That sort of town. I live along the shoreline and am about 5 minutes from the beach, so in the summertime the town population practically triples as out-of-towners flock to their summer beach houses. My friends and I shared a mutual dislike for these people because they would all walk along the main roads with no shirts on, trashing a lot of public areas, and generally just driving carelessly on the roads. But I digress. Last May, I was 17, and I began my first job at an ice cream shop in Delhi, centered right on the busiest street in town. Now my town is also very populated by elderly people, mostly people who have retired, as well as a lot of families. It wasn't really a town where you'd see many people between the ages of 20 and 30. It was very, very safe. Anyways, this one instance occurred back in August of 2011. I came in for a 4 to close shift, which was normally at around 9. We stay open a little later if there's any late night after dinner rush, so after cleaning up the shop, my coworkers and I would leave at about 10. I started my shift with my coworker Kenny, who's 20, and he ran the deli while I ran the ice cream part of the shop. My bosses had gone out for the day and left the employees in charge. They don't often leave, so this was rare. Anyways, it was just me and Kenny in the shop that evening. It was a slow day, and I just signed in and began cleaning behind the counter, when Kenny approached me and said, "If some guy comes in asking for Carl and Irene, tell him they're not here." My bosses were personable with customers, so they had a lot of friends in town, so it wasn't uncommon for customers to ask for them. I figured to say that since they're not here, I replied with an "I got this" attitude. Kenny nodded and said, "Yeah, well, this one dude's come in twice since we opened and has been asking if they're around. If you see him, he's got a bristly brown beard and was wearing a black t-shirt and a Mets hat." I nodded and he continued cleaning. The afternoon just dragged on till about 6:15 when guess who showed up. It was the exact man He walked through the doors, and I glanced over to Kenny, who shot me a look from the deli. The man slapped his palms on the counter and hunched in as he asked,
"You still making sandwiches, little miss?"
"No, sir," I replied, eyes darting from him to Kenny. "The deli closes at 6 in the summer, but you're welcome to come back tomorrow for lunch or get ice cream now." He let out a wheezy laugh.
"Shoot, I guess I'll just have to get some ice cream then."
Kenny was still eyeing the guy, so he paid and decided to stand inside, lingering and reading our sandwich menu. "This is some good ice cream you got here," he mumbled. "It's all homemade," I said without looking up from my cleaning.
"Your boss is here? You know, Carl and Irene? I just want to compliment them on this stuff. It's hella good."
He approached the counter, and I sensed something a little strange about him. He was probably in his late 30s, but he looked like he was the type of person who didn't have a girlfriend or wife or family. Kinda like the trailer park type, with dirt on his jeans and hands and sweat in his beard. "Nope, they're not available right now. Sorry to inform you." I swiftly moved into the dipping cabinet to occupy myself without scraping down ice cream. I was sure he was a summer traveler and creeper, but what else could he do when there were customers sitting outside eating? I felt pretty safe with people around, but as I leaned into the cabinet, I saw him loom over from the other side of the glass, watching me for a good 5 minutes. It got even weirder when he asked in a lower voice,
"You know, they make roadkill ice cream down south."
He laughed that ugly, wheezy laugh and said, "Can you imagine?"
"Can you imagine? But I bet even your boss could make it into tasty ice cream."
I responded only with a fake snort of amusement, and he continued watching me, and then said,
"What time you open till?"
he asked, making eye contact as I came out from the dipping cabinet. 9? I responded curtly. Was I creeped out? You bet. I noped out of there and busied myself in the back kitchen with dishes until eventually the guy just left. I heaved a sigh of relief, but it was all restored when Kenny came back with deli utensils and warned, if he comes back, I'm calling Carl and Irene. 7 finally rolls around, then 8, then 8:30, and there was still no sign of the man. Finally, it came around to 9:12 p.m., and I served my last customer. The second they leave, Kenny locked the front doors and we began our closing routine. He covered the ice cream while I swept. Our bosses weren't coming back to check on the shop until around 11, so we were by ourselves until then. Or so we thought. Kenny was running the dishes in the back while I wiped everything down when I saw headlights pulling up. Figuring the late customers would see that we were closed, I went back to wiping, and suddenly there was pounding on the door. My heart sank a little as I looked up to see a Mets logo moving around outside. I nervously shook my head and pointed to my wrist, indicating the time, and he just continued banging on the doors and shouting,
"Come on, pretty lady. I need to talk to your bosses. Are they back yet?"
I called back to Kenny, who had heard the ruckus and approached the doors and confronted the man, clearly ticked off. Kenny argued with the man, who was quite persistent, saying he needed to see Carl before tomorrow, and how he knew they were back there. Kenny shooed the man away, locked the doors, and turned to me and muttered, "Fucking weirdo." I asked if he had called Carl, and he said it probably wasn't worth it at this time of night, since they'd be home soon. At this point, it was around 9:45, and we were finishing up cleaning, and I was mopping while Kenny stood at the register, looking over the receipts. It was quiet, and he walked to the safe in back to switch out money for the register. And out of fucking nowhere, there's a voice at the screen door on the side of the shop.
"Shame if blood got on these nice, clean floors.
Whipping around, I saw the man standing behind the screen door with a knife in his hands and a grisly scowl plastered on his face. I screamed at the top of my lungs as he tried to push open the door, which had a measly little shift lock like a bathroom stall. He took out the knife and started jabbing it through the screen and tearing it open.
Tell that little shit to come back out here and we'll talk like men.
The psycho screamed as he was coming into the shop with a fucking knife. His first foot kicked through and stepped onto the tile. I was practically in tears when Kenny screamed for me to run into the back, so I hightailed it all the way through the kitchen and into the back office connecting directly to the kitchen, which was separated by a thick door with a deadbolt. We locked the door, and I crumbled to my knees, crying as Kenny called 911. The man was cackling that we weren't being very kind, treating a customer like this, and taunting us. After about 5 minutes, it became totally silent, and the police showed up and our bosses came home immediately, finding me and Kenny shaken up as we go through the events of the night. Turns out, the intruder took the money in the register and had gotten away with the vehicle, though we didn't know what kind because it was dark when he had actually driven up to the shop. We didn't hear much about him afterwards, but my bosses didn't stay open after 7 for the next 2 weeks in fear that the man would come back. Although he never did come back after that, I insisted working only the mornings and daytimes, and the shop installed an alarm system that would activate at 9:30. We also got a replacement for the screen door that was, well, actually a door. Kenny and I both still work at the shop and sometimes joke about the crazy man, but I often wonder if the man's motive was the money he took or victims to try that roadkill ice cream he was talking about. I work part-time at my university's IT department. I manage the public computer's site, fix machines when they're broken, and handle scheduling of the other consultants. I'm mostly on call all the time, and during a summer weekend, there's not much to do except get paid. The campus library is across the hall from my office. Normally it's open, even on weekends, but it was closed for the intersection this weekend before the semester began. Lights off, doors closed, there was no way to get in unless you have a swipe card access, which I do because there were computers in there. So I was in my office passing time on the internet when I heard a bit of a racket. I peek out the door, and there was this bigger man, probably around 40, tugging on the doors and trying to rip them open. He noticed me come out and asked, well, more like yelled to me, "When does this place open?" I pointed to the hour signs and explained it would be open on Monday when classes began. He walked away and seemed unsatisfied with my answer. More time passed, and out of boredom, I decided I would check out the library. I've only been in there once before while it was closed. I swiped my card and go in. It was really creepy in that place when it was closed, and I knew I wasn't supposed to be in there. If I got caught, I'd probably be in a small amount of trouble since I didn't really have permission or a reason for being in another's department area during closed hours. All the lights are off, except with only the light coming in through the windows. The place was huge, and you can hear ventilation fans clicking on and off. As I creep past the rows and aisles, the locked doors study cubicles creak and make noises occasionally, as if someone was inside of them. Which was often true. Students are known to hide in there after library closing to study in a quiet setting, or to have sex in them. Yeah, I know, gross. But the library has been closed for almost 24 hours at this point, and no one likely camped out in here. I just brushed it off as noises. Still, as I walked alone in this place, it felt like I wasn't. I went to the lounge area and sat, but felt very uncomfortable with the dark silence and got up soon after. So I decided I'd check out the bathroom, and as I walked in, I noticed that someone was in the stall. All I could see was 1 foot at first glance underneath the door. 1 naked foot, no shoes or socks, in a public restroom. 1 naked, bloody foot. There was a small puddle of blood on the floor in the stall, and small trickles of blood on the foot. I froze for a small moment and tightened up. I was startled at first because I didn't expect to find anyone else in here, and definitely didn't expect a fucking bloody foot. I didn't see any sort of socks or shoes around. No pants around ankles. Nothing like that. I didn't even see a second foot. What I did see was a pale, cold, white foot that was large too. The stall door was partially open, but not enough that I could see inside from my angle. I said with a shaken voice, "Hello?" No response. Nothing happened. I wondered if there was a body attached to that foot. I wondered if there's a dead body inside. I wonder if some kid is killing himself in there. I asked, What the fuck are you doing in there, man?" Then the toes slightly curl up, flex, then relax. I promptly turned right out the door and walked out of the library quickly, got back into my office as I tried to make sense of what I had just seen. Should I call the campus police? I really just didn't want to get involved with dealing with paperwork, questions with the police. I justified that I wasn't even supposed to be in there anyway, and would have to lie about some reason of why I was. I just called my friend Andy. I just wanted to talk to someone about what I had just seen. Andy and I talked for about 40 minutes, most of it just going like, "Shit, dude, that's messed up." I heavily considered calling the police, but so much time had passed, I assumed this person would be gone. I'm pretty sure the bloody foot person also certainly thought that he or she was alone, so they would have been startled by my appearance too. I decided to go back in and stay on my phone with Andy. I knew how stupid this was. If someone was hurting themselves, they wouldn't care to hurt me either. They're probably very unstable now that I thought about it, and had some sort of knife or blade. I wasn't in any mood to get in a knife fight here during my shift, but I wanted to go check the bathroom again. As I walked through the library, it was worse this time, because now I wasn't alone, and there's someone else here, possibly with the weapon, still dead silent. And now, it was silent and dark. I softly walked to the bathroom and listened outside the door for a moment. I don't hear any sound, but I get the chills as Andy is on the speakerphone, but was staying silent. I go inside, and the foot is still there. There's more blood than before, still cold and pale looking. The door is now shut to the stall. That was the only other change in the last 40 minutes. I didn't want to anger a possibly suicidal person. I ask, "Are you alright in there?" No response, no motion, only blood, and it makes me feel sick. I repeat, Are you okay in there? Do you need me to call for help?" Slowly, the foot turns and points towards me, and this time, a second foot steps down along with it, also with blood smeared all over it. Whatever's inside the stall is now standing and facing directly at me. With the wall between us, I can't see the top of any head. My heart starts racing. Finally, a deep voice responds,
"I am fine."
That was good enough an answer for me. I promptly turned and left. This time, I was running. I told myself before going in that if he was still there, I'd definitely call the police, but I still didn't. He said he was fine, and I wanted to get this out of my head and forget about it. The voice sounded like an older man, I guess around in his 30s or 50s. The size of the feet made him seem big, but not tall. It's hard to say. I locked the door to my office and did nothing for the last 30 minutes or so of my shift. When I stepped out into the hallway, there were bloody footprints walking out of the library and over to my office door. Plenty of them outside my door. Whatever it was pacing and standing there for a while. Small drips of blood led away from my door and stopped after a small distance. I was horrified. I hurried to my truck and paused for a moment and realized with the amount of blood outside my office door and in that hallway, I couldn't just leave. I'll probably be asked about it anyways. I should just call it in. I headed back up, and all the footprints were mostly gone. All of the fucking bloody footprints and drops are wiped away. There were only small smears here and there. It wasn't a perfect cleaning job. I was only gone at my truck for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. Whatever it is, it was still here, hanging around, watching me, cleaning up after itself, too. I was very frightened. I go back to my truck, and there are bloody towels in my door handle, on the ground and on the hood of my truck. This person is seriously fucking with me. I hurried over to the campus police, and I just told them the whole story, even the fact that I was also trespassing, and that I went back for a second visit instead of calling them first. I told them everything. They took pictures of my car and told me that they would look into it. They returned to the library, but requested that I don't accompany them back inside. I went home after that. This happened 2 days ago, and I haven't heard anything since. I work again tonight. Another closing shift.